Show 'em what we've got, chaps.
Hey folks, this is Picohan, and this is the Anthony in Operation Dunkirk on the Asia server. Since the devs have announced that they are going to bring back this operation in 2018, I thought it was a good time to look at the one they had last year in 2017. The one this year is supposed to allow Tier 6 and 7 allied destroyers instead of just the Tier 5 Anthony and Cyclone, so it'll be interesting to see what changes they make. So, Dunkirk is, of course, a quote-unquote historical operation. It's based off events that happened when they evacuated the British Expeditionary Force from France early on in World War II, and you basically do the same thing in this operation. The general gist is that early on there's this cap where you pick up soldiers and you try to bring them to the other cap on the other side of the channel, losing as few as you can. The player destroyers can pick up a certain number of troops each, but then there's also the civilian fleet of NPCs that follow you, and you need to protect both yourself and the civilian fleet from attacks from torpedo and dive bombers, and also from quote-unquote Schnellboots, which are, I think, basically the German equivalent of PT boats. They're very small ships, and they're more or less a one or two shot for all the destroyers that can participate in the operation, but they're very fast, and with the slow shells of both the Anthony and the Cyclone, they can be hard to hit unless you're right up near them. So as you can see, we're already shooting down some planes. The difference between the AA on the Anthony and the Cyclone was that the Cyclone has better base AA numbers, but then the Anthony has defensive fire, whereas the Cyclone has smoke screen. So as you just saw, there's an NPC that goes and kills himself in the minefield, and I think this is supposed to show the players that, oh, don't go in the minefield, you need to go around it to get to the other side. There is a way to save this NPC. I'm not exactly sure how you do it, but he has some hitboxes that he needs to go into, and if you can bump him away from the hitboxes, you get an extra ship in your fleet. And saving the guy is a bit of a gimmick, but like I said, it can help. It is an extra life, basically, if you can do it. So the other thing about the minefield is that it doesn't actually show up in the main view. You can only see it in the minimap. And I think this is actually a really cool feature of this operation, because it'll help train some people to look at the minimap for navigating, and that's a skill I think a lot of players don't have. So here you can see the first few waves of planes and Schnellboots coming in. You can see that this Schnellboot's at like 4 kilometers, and I'm already leading him pretty much off the screen. All of the waves are basically going to come from the east, because I guess that's where Germany is geographically. The waves of planes have fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers, and while only the torp and dive bombers can hurt your ship and the convoy, the fighters can still spot you, and if you're being spotted by planes, you can get shot at by shore batteries over on the Dunkirk side. In general, what I think the strat is for this first part is, since the waves come from the east, what you want to do is you want to go wide and try to follow planes in with each wave, such that you maximize the time that the planes are in your AA range, and therefore you can shoot down more. Originally, I really thought that Anthony was the meta for this operation because it has defensive AA, but if you can follow the planes in reliably, I think the Cyclone with its higher base characteristic is actually better. Of course, what you want to do is save your defensive fire such that you're using it while as many planes fly through your AA as possible. I also hit the speed boost so I can better follow planes in, but you can see I didn't really go out very far this time, and I probably should have gone further, but this was basically, I think, earlier in the days of this operation when I hadn't thought about it that much. So a couple plane fleets coming in here. Sometimes they prioritize the lead destroyer, and sometimes they prioritize the transport ships. If you have cyclones, what you can do is set a smoke screen such that the transports go through the smoke screen, and that will keep these planes from attacking them. It's a little bit late to comment on this, but you'll also notice that I'm not running premium anything. I don't think that at tier 5 this operation made enough money to justify the use of premium consumables. That being said, it's also not that difficult an operation, and I don't think you need it too much. As you can see, I'm basically circling here, trying to kill the Schnellboots and then stay under planes as much as possible. The Schnellboot, you also saw how fast that was. They only have torps that shoot forward, I believe. So if you're on their side, they're not that dangerous, although they can torp the convoy. Coming up here is probably the most dangerous, quote-unquote, part of this operation as far as navigation goes. When you go through the gap between the two minefields here, the main thing to watch out for is that torp planes can drop you, and then you have to turn to avoid them, and then you run into the minefield. I've never tried to, go around this, but I do know if you get too far off course and away from the convoy, the torp planes will focus you and you'll basically get crapped on. So here comes another wave of torp planes behind us. I'm just trying to keep up the speed, and then once the planes get into my AA range, I'll trigger the defensive fire, keep moving in the direction, and again, try to keep them in my AA bubble for as long as possible. Of course, the replay doesn't show it, but you also want to be clicking on the planes, click on the closest ones when you can. That will, of course, give you a buff in AA DPS for that plane, which is pretty significant. And you really need to do this because even with the defensive fire, if you can see, these planes don't necessarily melt. Everything's a tier 1 plane, but at the same time, your AA is basically garbage. I think you got 5 DPS. Even when they let the Gallant into this operation, and you think, oh, it's a tier 6 ship, it still has the same garbage AA, and so it's not actually that much better. Just now you saw that one of the player destroyers ran into the minefield and he died. If a player destroyer or an NPC transport goes down, For a little bit of time after, there is a cap circle where you can pick up survivors, and that will contribute to your overall disembarkation count. If this happens to a ship because of the minefield, though, this is a little bit of a trap, because what happens is that the first ship died in the minefield, the second ship tries to pick up the survivors and then also dies in the minefield, and so on and so forth. And I've definitely seen some lemming trains of this, and yeah. Another wave of dive bombers and torp planes coming in here, and you'll see that, well, if I had premium defensive, it might have been up again by now, but I'm still trying to keep myself under the planes as much as possible while deleting as many Schnellboots as I can. Once you clear the channel between the two minefields, you want to go a little bit to the northeast, because the next engagement, as you can see, there's fighters from the Germans coming up from the south, and there's fighters from England, I guess, coming from the north, and you want to help out this fighter engagement as much as possible, because if your friendly fighters survive, they will help shoot down the next few waves of torp and dive bombers. And while it's not entirely necessary, it will help a lot. All the fighters do, though, is lock themselves up, so as long as you stay underneath the fight, it's easy to help out. Easier than following the planes in from the torp and dive bomber waves, at least. One of the things you'll notice from just a bit ago is that I torped a Schnellboot. This is one of the reasons I think the Gallant isn't actually much stronger than the Anthony or Cyclone for this operation. It's because the Gallant's significantly better torps are pretty much not very useful. The Schnellboots are always coming like towards you, so you don't really have good angles on them, and they die so fast to guns there isn't time for the torps to make contact. But if you do get the broadside of a Schnellboot, they do go in a straight line, so if you aim at the indicator, your spread will be accurate. Here I started going back for a ring of survivors, and you can see I caught the attention of enemy dive and torpedo planes. You'll notice that when the dive bombers hit me, the count of my transporting personnel actually went down. And this is like a cute mechanic. It's like, initially you only have slots for 250 extra survivors, but if you lost some, you can pick up more. But this is not really an abusable mechanic, it's just a nice touch. Also, of course, the bot torpedo planes only know how to auto-drop, so for the most part, while you're shooting at the Schnellboots, as long as you keep maneuvering, the torpedo planes shouldn't be able to hit you. So as far as the operation goes, mostly as long as you stay together and you don't run into the minefield, it shouldn't be that hard to win and even get a 5-star. The trickiest extra condition to meet to get a 5-star is almost certainly getting the 7,000 soldiers to shore. But I think it's pretty hard to lose the 3,000 soldiers such that you lose the operation outright. This is a pretty decent run, I guess, and you can see we've got 7,300 and we've lost like 3 ships on the way. It does help for ships to be distributed along the length of the convoy, because as you can see, they can come from multiple directions. So there's not too much more to see here. I'm hanging in the back because I think that's where there's the most extra Schnell boots and planes to be farmed, but you can see I finally get the chance to pick up some survivors from this other Anthony who got knocked out. It's okay to stay in the back like this and even go back for more farming, because the operation ends after the first 3,000 troops are offloaded. You don't actually need to offload 7,000 for the 5-star, they just need to be alive at the time of the operation ending. One more thing to note about these caps for picking up people, both from the shore and from sunk ships, is that you need to be moving below a certain speed to be able to pick up survivors. Also, you can see that in this cap, I'm going to maximize my capacity, and then you see I can't pick up further survivors from that cap. Finally, here is an example of what I was talking about earlier with torping the Schnell boots. You can't see it in this replay because lock-ons don't work, but I'm going to throw one set of torps at one Schnell boot and a second set of torps at another one, and they go so straight and so fast, the torps will make contact, and there is a double strike. And I'm just gonna keep farming till the end here, but you can see the troop counter at the top tick over to 3,000, and it says the operation is over. And here you get a little blurb about the historicality of the operation, and that's pretty much it.
We sank an enemy destroyer.
And in the results screen, there's nothing too special to see here. 12 ships sunk, 55 planes downed. I think I screen capped this particular run because it was my most planes killed. 3 torp kills is also a little bit unusual, but other than that, this is pretty normal for this operation. So I think that's it, and have a nice day.